A storm rages over the dense forests of Francia. Thunder cracks across the sky as a lone rider gallops through the mud-soaked battlefield. Fires smolder in the distance, smoke twisting into the clouds like dark banners. The horse whinnies in fear, but the rider's resolve is unshakable. It is Charlemagne, king of the Franks, and he is about to reshape Europe forever. Rome has fallen, but a new empire will rise from its ashes. The wind tore through the dense forests of northern Francia, rattling branches and sending leaves spiraling like scattered banners. A lone rider emerged from the mist, horse hooves sinking into the mud, eyes scanning the horizon. Flames flickered in the distance, smoke curling into the stormy sky. Villages lay in ruins, the air thick with a metallic tang of blood and iron. This was the broken world left in the wake of Rome's fall, a continent fractured by warring tribes, petty kings, and merciless invaders. At the center of this chaos rode Charlemagne, king of the Franks, a man whose presence alone commanded loyalty. His armor was scratched yet polished. His sword, heavy but familiar, reflected the dying light of the evening fires. Beside him, his most trusted generals urged the vanguard forward, their faces grim. They knew the stake. This was not just another battle. It was the birth of a vision, an empire that could restore order to a world teetering on the edge of anarchy. The countless Saxon warriors wait ahead, one general muttered, voice low, almost drowned by the wind. They fight like ghosts of the forest. They fear neither death nor darkness. Charlemagne's eyes narrowed. Then we must strike as one. Swift, decisive, unstoppable. Every sword, every man must be a part of the same heartbeat. His words carried weight, not just to his men, but to the history they were shaping. For this was more than conquest. It was survival, ambition, and destiny intertwined. As the army advanced through the night, scouts returned with dire news. The Saxons had set ambushes along the rivers and cliffs. Fires in distant villages illuminated their preparation, signaling not submission, but defiance. The tension was electric. Every step forward was a step into uncertainty, a gamble against an enemy who knew the land like the back of their hand. But Charlemagne was no ordinary king. Where others saw chaos, he saw opportunity. He envisioned an army forged not from fear alone, but from discipline, loyalty, and relentless strategy, a force capable of reshaping the fractured European landscape. Knights drilled in the rain, archers lined the treetops, and infantry marched in unbroken columns, their footsteps synchronizing with the heartbeat of a rising empire. In the distance, a horn blared, a warning, a challenge, an omen. The Saxon war chiefs had chosen their battleground, and Charlemagne's army approached like a living storm, ready to collide with the fury of a people unwilling to bend. The tension was unbearable, each man aware that this night could mark either their triumph or their annihilation. And then from the shadows of a nearby ridge, a rider appeared, a lone figure, cloaked with a banner of unfamiliar sigils. His eyes locked with Charlemagne's across the battlefield. A whisper of recognition passed between them, unspoken but electric. The war was about to begin, but what he carried and the message he bore could change everything. Charlemagne tightened his grip on his sword. The storm roared around them, echoing the storm in his heart. Ahead lay fire, blood, and the uncertain fate of a continent. Behind him, the first cracks in loyalty whispered, would Europe's first super army rise victorious, or crumble before its first true test? The answer would wait, hidden in the darkness of the night, ready to strike with the dawn. Dawn broke over the misty plains, a pale light glinting off armor and steel. The Saxon war horns blared like the roar of wild beasts echoing across the forested hills. Charlemagne's army, now a river of disciplined soldiers, advanced steadily, banners snapping in the chill wind. Smoke from distant fires painted the sky crimson, and the scent of damp earth and burning wood mingled with tension so thick it could be felt in every heartbeat. Hold the line! Charlemagne's voice rang out, clear and commanding, cutting through the chaos. Wait for my signal, and we strike as one. The Saxons emerged from the tree line, a wall of fur, axes and snarling faces. Their charge was sudden, a tide of raw fury crashing toward the Frankish phalanx. But Charlemagne had anticipated this. He signaled the cavalry, who swept in a wide arc, their horses' hooves thundering like rolling thunder. Archers loosed volleys of arrows blackening the sky, and Saxon cries were swallowed by the storm of steel. "Push forward! Do not falter!" shouted Duke Roland, Charlemagne's nephew, as he raised his sword high. Knights smashed into enemy lines, shields locking, swords clashing. Dust and blood swirled together in a violent dance. Yet Charlemagne knew that brute force alone would not secure his empire. Behind the front lines, political intrigue simmered. The Lombard princes recently conquered watched from a fortified ridge. Some whispered of rebellion, others of surrender, but all waited to see if Charlemagne's new super army could truly hold the chaotic. A messenger arrived, panting, torn cloak flapping. My king, the eastern lords grow restless. If Saxons fall, they may rise against us. Charlemagne's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the horizon. Then we must show strength not only with swords, but with strategy. Divide their enemies, unite our allies, and strike fear into hearts before they even draw steel. The battle raged proud. Saxon shield walls wavered, only to surge again with terrifying resilience. Charlemagne rode through the ranks, personally directing maneuvers, repositioning cavalry, and signaling reserves hidden in the woods. A contingent of Frankish infantry executed a daring flanking maneuver, catching the Saxon rear off guard, cutting off escape routes, and forcing many to surrender. Amidst the chaos, Roland raised his horn, calling for reinforcements. Trianine's gaze flickered toward the distant ridge, where the Lombard nobles muttered among themselves. Their loyalty was fragile. One wrong decision could ignite rebellion. Political stability, he knew, was as precarious as victory on the battlefield. Hours passed and the dust settled. The Saxons were broken, their war chiefs captured or fleeing. Yet Charlemagne did not celebrate. The battlefield was littered with bodies, cries of the wounded echoing in the damp morning air. Victory was only a step in a longer war, a war for the soul of Europe itself. Charlemagne dismounted, bloodied but resolute, staring into the horizon. Shadows moved among the treetops, Vikings perhaps, or rogue bands from the east. New threats waited, silent and patient. Europe's first super army had triumphed, but the war for the continent was far from over. One storm awaited, Charlemagne next. The sun rose high over the plains, casting long shadows across a battlefield still strewn with the remnants of war. Charlemagne stood atop a ridge, armor scarred and smeared with mud and blood, surveying the aftermath. Smoke curled lazily from distant villages, the cries of the wounded and the wails of the mourning carrying across the fields. Victory was theirs, but it had come at a cost. The Saxon rebellion had been crushed, yet Charlemagne knew that conquest alone could not forge an empire. He walked among his soldiers, placing a reassuring hand on a trembling knight's shoulder, nodding at the weary archers and infantry. Their eyes were hollow from battle, yet burning with loyalty. This was no longer just an army. It was a force that could reshape Europe itself. Your courage will be remembered, Charlemagne said softly, voice carrying over the groans of the injured. Not for the lands we take, but for the peace we will build. But peace, he realized, was fragile. The Lombards, still wary in their fortresses, would need careful handling. The eastern lords, too, would test his authority. And beyond the northern forest, whispers of Vikings and other invaders stirred, a reminder that the shadows of Europe's past were never far behind. Political cunning as much as military strength would be required to hold what he had forged. In the royal tent, Charlemagne conferred with his advisors. Maps were spread across the table, lines drawn and redrawn, showing not only territories won, but potential rebellions and future campaigns. We have built more than an army, he told them. We have built a symbol. The strength of the sword must be matched by the wisdom of law, faith, and loyalty. This is how empires endure. Word of his victory traveled fast. From Rome to the edges of the former empire, kings and nobles spoke his name with a mixture of fear and respect. Where once Rome had held sway, now Charlemagne's shadow stretched across the continent, a Western empire reborn, guided not by senators and consuls, but by a man who had fused martial brilliance with political acumen. Yet in his heart, Charlemagne felt the weight of his decisions. Thousands had fallen by his command, countless lives altered forever. As he gazed upon the horizon, the enormity of his legacy pressed upon him. This was a world after Rome, a world waiting for order, for structure, for vision, and he had become its unlikely architect. He dismounted and walked toward a memorial erected for the fallen knights and Saxons alike. Silence enveloped him, broken only by the whisper of the wind through the trees. History will judge us, he murmured. And not only by the wars we fought, but by the world we leave behind. And yet, as the sun dipped toward the west, shadows lengthened across Europe. New threats stirred. Distant rebellions, rival kings, and the relentless march of time. Charlemagne had forged the first super army since Rome, but even the mightiest force could not hold back the tide forever. Europe had been shaped by sword and strategy, but the story of its empire was only beginning. The legacy of Charlemagne would echo for centuries, a beacon of ambition, unity, and the fragile triumph of order over chaos. The storm had passed, but the horizon promised new battles.